People that were traditionally making $500,000 a year in Silicon Valley are now like literally lifting boxes in a distribution facility.
When you have a job, you don't own the job. They're renting you, right? They're renting your time. And they can fire you anytime.
Technology is a big leverage piece too. Like we use investor portals for handling distributions and reporting, which then is put together by our operations team. Our operations team is using tech for collecting rent, for automatic notifications, for to make sure we're keeping our collections up. They're starting to implement AI into their operational stack to automate a lot of stuff. I actually read what did I read? I was reading an interesting article, I forget where, this morning, that was talking about this is a real crazy, interesting time, and a lot of people are trying to predict this AI thing, this will parlay back into real estate, but they're talking about how people that were traditionally making $500,000 a year in Silicon Valley are now like literally lifting boxes in a distribution facility because all of their jobs, all the coders that were making big money are out the door. A lot of the middle management, the program managers in tech, Silicon Valley. And even these people are starting to question like, okay, AI is going to make a few people billionaires, if not trillionaires. And then everybody else is going to drop out. And then if everybody's losing their job to automation, robotics, and AI, like where does that leave our markets? There's going to be a massive redistribution of wealth and a massive gap in wealth. Like how can you leverage real estate to take advantage of that? How can you use real estate to insulate yourself from potentially losing your job? A lot of white collar jobs are going away, whether it's bookkeepers, accounting, lawyers, et cetera. And people might argue with me, but how do you leverage real estate now to get ahead of that? And how can you use AI in your business? But where is this income gap going to happen? Because we buy affordable housing assets, right? There's a talk of UBI, universal basic income, that even staunch Republicans or conservatives that are generally against sort of social program, we're going to have UBI to keep sort of the fabric of society together. Well, UBI is kind of a form of communism, right? So but maybe that's where we have to go. So how can, Mitch, how can our listeners, and how do we leverage real estate to get ahead of people potentially losing their jobs to AI but people are, even if they're on UBI, they're going to need a place to live. That's why I love affordable housing.
I talked to a guy, actually, Ahmad, who we worked with in the past, Trav. I talked to him the other day, and he said, yeah, like I know several coders, more than 10, who have just been fired just immediately because multiple of these companies is just cutting them out. And then they leave in a couple coders who understand how to manipulate AI to code. So now what does this flow into HR, accounting, bookkeeping, legal, all of the key functions of a business? I think the answer is yes. And guess what? We live in a country where every single business operates under the goal, with the goal of cutting the fat and doing things more efficient. So I do think we're going to see a massive loss of jobs. But for those folks who own assets, they have other options. And they built some other castle, right?
We talk about paper assets. The bulk of the gains in the stock market is in a few companies that are elevating through AI. Also, there was like 800,000 jobs cut. I forget what the time period was. Meanwhile, at the same time, in those same companies where those jobs are cut, Meta was one of them, the output of these companies have gone up 8% every year. So their price per earnings ratios are skyrocketing. People that own the stocks in these companies are getting massively wealthy. But what does that really mean? There's a high concentration of wealth in a few companies, and there's going to be a high concentration of wealth in a few people that might have stock options. These companies that are going to go IPO, they're working for the right company at the right time. But it's really interesting. And a lot of these people they know they're actually replacing themselves because they have directives. They're actually getting scorecarded on how much AI they use and how much they're teaching AI to do their own jobs. And I was actually, even my buddy who is in IT for a medical system in the Midwest, they program technology equipment like routers and switches. I won't get into what that is, but the stuff he works on, he has to teach AI what he's doing. And he knows damn well that he's teaching AI to replace his job. And that's what this article said. A lot of these people know that they're actually teaching AI to replace their jobs. There's an end game, there's a shelf life to these people. And yeah, it's such a paradigm shift right now.
Well, and I think this AI conversation is tough because we don't know the direction it's going to go. And it's kind of like the cat's out of the bag. Asking what AI is going to do is like trying to predict what my daughter's going to do for a living someday. She's 9. right? Like she's her own entity. She thinks for herself. She will think for herself more and more as she grows up. So like the AI thing is very complex. Nobody knows. In fact, the founders of multiple AI companies, you ask them, oh, well, what about this? What would the machine do if this? And they're like, yeah, we don't know because it has its own sort of like brain, right? That's the whole concept. But I'll say this, like very, very simple terms. When you have a job, you don't own the job. Okay. You're renting it. They pay you, well, they're renting you, right? They're renting your time and they can fire you anytime. And so for me, owning things is very important. And one of the things that's limited resource, whether we have AI or not, or whatever technology, is land, property, assets, hard assets. That's a limited resource in our world. Right? The earth only has so much. And so for me, owning the land, however that plays out in the future, I think will always be an asset. In fact, you see a lot of these tech folks who make a ton of money. Where do they put the money? They buy the land, they buy real estate. And so, in other words, I think that we can insulate ourselves in a lot of ways. I don't think it's perfect insulation. We might have threats here and there, but over time, like people tend to always need a place to live unless they start to upload us to the cloud, which then I don't even know. I'll just go shoot myself, I guess. But here's the thing. People need to live somewhere. We are going to see more of an economic divide. We're seeing it right now. We've seen it over the last couple years in an accelerated manner since COVID. We see Wall Street get wealthier. And when I say Wall Street, that's in my opinion, that's equity owners, real estate owners, assets owners get richer. Main Street's getting poorer. We are seeing the middle class getting destroyed in our country, which makes our country beautiful. So it saddens me. But I think that if you're not careful and you're not thinking about this and you're not building your own castle and you're not owning something, you could be eliminated immediately. Not that long ago, we told all the high school kiddos to go study code because we'll always need it. That's what we tell them, right? Oh, we'll always need it. It's going to be great. Go study code. Code got taken out like in a 6-month period. Not all of it, but like you get what I'm saying. But it's the perfect time to really think about what you're doing to add value in this economy, because what you're doing to add value, if that erodes, if that goes away and it's replaced by a machine, right, by a computer, then you need to think long and hard about how you're bringing food to the table. And so for me, I'm not a tech guy. I understand it. We use it, whatever, but I'm not writing code or creating AI, but I do know that land, property, assets, cash flowing assets, especially housing, I believe in that. I believe in that as a shelter. I don't think it'd be perfect. I think we could see some threats. We could also see a lot of opportunities. You think about AI with home building, right? Think about this. A mobile home today, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. Okay, we're in the mobile home park industry. So a 2-bedroom, 1-bath to land on your property is somewhere in the $80,000 range, let's say. If you think about just the mobile home, how that's created, all the way from the raw materials to the work, to the parts and the pieces, to the manufacturer, to all the way to that end user on the lot. If all of that, all the way from mining the minerals to create the steel or whatever, right? Like everything, if it's all influenced and controlled by AI, we will see the cost ideally go down. Does that $80,000 mobile home now get produced by AI machines and all the things, and it gets transported by a truck that's driverless, right? Maybe. And if that's the case, we might see mobile homes go to $20,000. Okay, well, that provides some opportunity for us to go infill and create housing. And so we can't predict how it goes, but I do think we're going to see our industry influence as well.
Well, I'm certainly betting on that. There's also other macro tailwinds for what we're doing. There's some legislation that's getting passed to where, certain manufactured houses that don't need to be manufactured on steel chassis because they realize these are just getting set on a lot and they're not ever moving again. That's going to reduce the cost per home by $10,000 to $15,000. That was some new legislation that just passed. I don't know the specifics. I probably should, but I'm too busy living my life. But also there's advancements in medicine. So people are living longer, and just like pure numbers, you have more people out there that need a place to live. You have an increasing demand for affordable housing because perhaps people are getting outsourced by AI or automation or whatever the case is happening. So you have more people that need housing, but you have a finite resource, which is land and housing. And the cost to build is really, really expensive. With mobile home parks, you can buy under replacement costs. You can then, infill. So it's good. It's a win-win. You're solving housing for people that need affordable housing, and you're also making a good living for yourself and building wealth and equity and cash flow. So there are all these tailwinds, and I think even the government sees that. They see that we need more housing, and so I think they're going to start doing things to help solve that. And stick-built houses, stick-built apartment complexes, brand new, are just too costly to build, especially with the cost of materials and labor right now.
Well, and if you go back to the AI or the UBI conversation, when you think about UBI, that would be some form of the wealthiest companies in the world, the ones that are, basically control the world via AI, are taxed at a certain percentage, which goes into government's hands, and then government redistributes that via UBI. I mean, I don't know how else they do it other than printing a bunch of capital, which destroys the dollar. But fundamentally, the companies make a bunch of money, goes to the government via taxes, it's redistributed via UBI. I would encourage everybody to think about that scenario and then ask yourself, how do you create a net to grab some of that UBI? How do you create services? In our case, we have land and we have systems and we have mobile home parks, right? So we're able to grab eventually a piece of that and support our families above just getting a check for a couple grand for UBI. And I think that's, again, like, is this what the future holds? Are we going to look back and you guys laugh at me and you're like, oh man, that didn't pan out at all the way Mitch thought it would? Okay, maybe, I don't know. But like, how do you start thinking ahead of this versus just like making your lunch in the morning, dropping the kids and going to work in your HR job? All respect for somebody working HR, but like, you might be taken out very soon. You might need to start thinking about this economy and the direction it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think obviously we're skewed. We like housing, we like buying real estate and hard assets, but I think it's absolutely something to consider.